Hello, I am Xarkun and this is World of Warships Legends. Now let me tell you, when I first played the Montana, as it was loaned out to me by Wargaming, I was kind of meh on the ship. But as you can see, I'm playing the Montana again, and that's because I recently completed the Bureau project, which I really didn't spend any time consciously trying to grind by playing the requisite ships for each segment in order to expedite the process of getting the ship back into my port because, as I said, I was a little bit meh on the thing. But now that I do have it back, and now that I've played a few more games in it, I like it a lot more. Even though the Montana has 12 16-inch guns, which is a pretty high gun count, even for battleships at the legendary tier, these guns, I would go so far as to say, are some of the most consistently accurate guns in the game. And that alone makes the Montana, in my mind, a very good ship. That's not to say that all good ships, all good battleships, must always have reliable and consistent guns. I don't think that. I enjoy a lot of battleships that don't have reliable and consistent guns, and I think some of them are even kind of good, despite the fact that their guns may not be super accurate. But it certainly helps in this case, along with the American armor piercing that these guns shoot, which is excellent, because it's super heavy AP, does a lot of damage, penetrates at slightly steeper angles than your typical armor piercing. The thing about the Montana, though, is that it really can't be played the way that most people like to play battleships in this meta, and the way that you're going to see the enemy battleships on this enemy team play. So what I want to talk about is pushing in with your battleship and positioning it, because everything I do in this game, all the damage I get, any of the ships I sink, it is all going to have to do with my positioning. And there goes the first one, the Minotaur. By the way, that Minotaur was within torpedo range. 10-kilometer torpedoes has the Minotaur, which means we can expect torpedoes to be coming from that direction, and that is why we are not continuing to go forward. The problem before us is this Yamato, who is pushing out. Now, I don't think it's advisable to push out into the Yamato, or in the Yamato, rather, because the Yamato has one of the most punishable citadels in this game, should it be exposed. Of course, we don't actually punish his citadel right there. Somehow our shells ricochet against his armor. Perhaps he's a little bit more angled than he looks, and then the rest of our shells catch the island there. But we can't afford to stay in this position. We do have to move forward. If we take even one salvo into the broadside from that Yamato, it is likely to citadel us and cripple us for the rest of the game. So we're going to use this island to shield ourselves from the Yamato and try to get around his side so that we can get access to his citadel as he deals with our Bismarck teammate. Although it looks like our Bismarck teammate is dispatching him with relative ease. There goes the Yamato. We don't have to worry about him anymore. Now we find ourselves in the center of the map. And you've heard me talk about this before, how centralized positioning can be very valuable in a battleship. I've had people disagree with me on that in the comments section, but take a look at this GK over there and the two battleships, and also there's a cruiser over there in the Alpha Cap. Provided those battleships in the Alpha Cap continue to move forward, which they are, I will have a choice of being able to shoot either the GK's broadside or the broadsides of the battleships in Alpha because of my centralized position. And that right there is the value of the centralized position in a battleship. You can see that the range of my guns extends all across the map into all three of these capture circles from this location. And that means, should I choose to exert it, I have influence over the entire map with my guns. Any ships giving broadside to the center are necessarily at danger, or in danger, rather, of being hit very, very hard by me. But now that the Grosse Kurfürst is sort of moving out of our gun range, and no threat to that Charlie Cap over there, where we have 3 teammates, we're going to focus our attention onto this side of the map, Alpha, where we can see 2 battleships, a Massachusetts and a Bismarck, pushing in toward a single friendly battleship who is sitting there bow tanking them and reversing. This is not a good strategy for winning. You cannot bow tank and reverse and hope to just have the enemies come to you and present themselves for damage. No, you have to go around the map. You have to move your ship into locations where you can take access, or where you can have access to the enemy's broadsides. That's how you're going to get broadsides, and that's how you're going to be effective. So the Bismarck has been taken out, in part thanks to our very big salvo on him, and now we're moving in toward the Massachusetts, who, if he's not careful, is going to be caught in a crossfire between myself and the battleship who had been bow tanking this Massachusetts and Bismarck previously. Although, there's a mistake I'm making here, which is not paying great attention to my minimap. Note the shells going across the screen that did not come from the Massachusetts and the spotting ribbon that we just acquired. That's because there's an Alaska right there, and he was spotted previously. His last location on the map was grayed out and was available to us should we have chosen to pay attention to it, but we didn't. And as a consequence, we've pushed out between the Massachusetts and the Alaska, and now we find ourselves in a crossfire where we have to choose, do we angle against the Massachusetts or do we angle against the Alaska? And that's a very hard choice, because the Massachusetts does have 16-inch guns, which absolutely could punish our Citadel, but the Alaska's guns are also perfectly capable of punishing our Citadel. So right now we're in a bit of a pickle, and you can see just how much health we're losing because of it. There's a difference between pushing in aggressively for no reason and pushing in a controlled, aggressive way, which is what I've been attempting to do in this battle. And what I'm doing right now at this very moment is pushing in far too aggressively without paying attention to the positions of the enemy ships relatively close to me. As a result, I've been punished and reduced to less than 20,000 health. That's one thing that you need to be paying attention to every time you're in a battleship. Map awareness. It's one of the key aspects of this game. One of the aspects that is hardest to master, along with positioning, and yet it is the most important aspect. You can be very good at aiming, you can have an excellent commander build, buffing the armor penetration of your AP shells on your battleships, but none of it matters unless your positioning is good. And our positioning is what allowed us to rack up 182,000 damage up until this point, and we're not quite done yet. We are in imminent danger of being sunk, though. That Alaska has a hit points advantage over us, and his guns are excellent. He's now switched to high explosive because he's not getting too much effectiveness out of his AP against our bow. We hit him there with our own AP, breaking one of his guns temporarily, and we're debating on what do we want to do. Well, I'll tell you what we don't want to do. What we don't want to do, and we haven't quite decided it yet, is push straight into this Alaska. Oftentimes, that is not a good idea. And a little bit of evaluation of the terrain on the map and the position of the enemy ship can yield a different strategy if you look at it. This Alaska's position is just screaming, don't push directly into him. Instead, go left around this island. And maybe in doing so, we might even be able to take this capture circle. Alaska hits us again with high explosive, lights 2 fires. We damage Khan with 2,500 health left. But that 2,500 health is still keeping us floating, and our guns are reloaded. So we can still be a threat to this Alaska. Plus, there doesn't seem to be any risk of losing this game. It appears that the Alaska is about to be the last ship left alive on his team, and a lot of that has to do with my very controlled and aggressive push into the center of the map, where I had access to big shots on a number of ships that directly allowed my teammates on either of the flanks to help take those ships out. And now the Alaska is moving forward, perhaps having forgotten about our position or thinking we aren't so much a threat anymore. And as he comes around the corner, he's giving broadside to us. So there, we're able to hit him, and we permanently disable both of his front guns, absolutely crippling his ship after we took them out several times. That's one of the dangers of pure bow tanking in the Alaska, is that your guns have their own hit points, and if they get reduced enough and then hit again, they can be permanently destroyed. Now that Alaska takes us out, and that's unfortunate. That was due to our own error, our own not paying attention to the map. And that is one thing to be said about the Montana. It can't really push in the same way that other battleships might be able to. That's not to say it's not heavily armored, but it's a massive target. It's vulnerable to high explosive, and its broadside is susceptible to armor-piercing damage in a big way. So pushing in aggressively without knowing the positions or without paying attention to the positions of the enemies and allowing yourself to get into a crossfire or get caught in a crossfire, well, it can be very detrimental for your health. But despite that mistake, we end up winning the game and getting nearly 3,000 base XP in doing so. Move your battleships around. That's the message today. Hope you enjoyed it. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.